I think that Clemson benefits from this chaos. They benefit from this game, and so does another team that we'll talk about here. But Clemson, how do they win the ACC? They're currently first in odds to win the ACC championship game, and no doubt do they benefit from this chaos because Florida State was the odds-on favorite before kickoff to win the ACC. Now, they've fallen down behind Clemson and, you guessed it, Miami, and they would be well behind Notre Dame, too, if Notre Dame was an ACC member. So you look here at the ACC, and I will tell you, I have been someone who's been low on Clemson this whole time, and rightfully so. When you go 4-4 in the ACC with a top 5 talent roster, there are questions. I mean, I think Dabo Swinney for a while has been on his Mark D'Antonio the later years at Florida State. I think he's been on that type of run these previous few seasons, really ever since 2020. And Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and good defense and Brent Venables carried him in 2020. Venables tried to carry him in 2021, then left for Oklahoma. And I think, honestly, Clemson's gotten worse every single season since 2018. They were worse in 19, worse in 20. While the 22 team won the ACC, I do think that the 21 Clemson team played a tougher schedule at the end of the day and end of the season was more impressive. I think they were better than the 22 Clemson team, and 23 was just a disaster, bottom of the barrel. But Garrett Riley is in his second year, and elite coaches like Garrett Riley do big things in year 2. Matt Luke was hired as the offensive line coach. He gets to work with a plethora of returning starters, particularly, I think, 2 great offensive tackles in Blake Miller and Tristan Lay, and also a guard in Marcus Tate, and a few other offensive linemen who could be good and probably will be good with the development that they're receiving. They return enough on the defensive line with Peyton Page, and obviously with star Peter Woods, who's moved to defensive end. Barrett Carter comes back, Avion Terrell. I mean, they have players. And they haven't used the portal, but they have enough talent to where the portal and Dabo's refusal to use it is not going to kill them like it would, obviously Indiana, for example. It won't kill Clemson. It'll hamper them, but it won't kill them. I think Clemson should expect to be at the top, and they probably won't be at the top, at least every year or most years if they don't use the portal. But Clemson returns a lot of production, a lot of starters. I think they've made critical coaching staff upgrades, particularly in the trenches. And even with a loss to Georgia, I think Georgia's the best team in football. And as of now, I think it's their year to lose the national title. I think they're the best team in the nation by a significant margin. So a loss to Georgia doesn't define the season. I think what defines the season for Clemson is, what do you do in a likely loss? If they win it, then I don't even think that shows that Georgia's overrated. I just think that shows Clemson's one of the best teams in the country right out of the gate. But if they compete with Georgia for a half or 3 quarters, and they look good in the trenches, and it's more so because of Georgia's skill position talent and depth rather than their outright superior toughness, and that's why Georgia pulls away, that's encouraging. Depending on how Clemson handles, games against Appalachian State, because they're a tough team who's played, Michigan, Texas A&M, other teams down to the wire, North Carolina for 2 years in a row. A game against NC State is big. And if the trenches leading up to that game against Florida State are dominant, and that is where Clemson's identity is, and they're able to run the ball with Maffa and whoever backs him up, and Klubnik looks better, and the receivers, especially the young talented ones, come through, they can win the ACC. Don't kid yourself. At this point, after watching Florida State, who I kind of foolishly, in hindsight, thought would have the best defense in the conference, I would say Clemson is going to have the best defense in the ACC right now. And with an offense that I think is bound to take steps forward, who knows? I mean, Clemson just 2 years ago won the ACC with DJ Uiagalelei at quarterback, and a defense that was one of the worst of Clemson's history over the past decade, because they've had some pretty elite defenses dating all the way back to the start of the college football playoff era in 2014. So I think Clemson absolutely can win the ACC. How they would do it, I think, is dominance in the trenches, because I don't think they have the quarterback and the wide receivers and the tight ends, and I'd say even the running backs. They don't have the skill position players, period, to win the ACC, certainly to win a college football playoff game, if their trenches aren't dominant. But their trenches can be dominant. And I think that tackle duo, I think the entire offense, the entire offensive line perhaps, the defensive line, linebackers, DBs, the defense for sure, is going to be one of the best in the ACC. The defense will be one of the best in the country for sure, based off of how they recruit and coach there. They're currently first in odds to win the ACC championship. Vegas was wrong yesterday with the Georgia Tech Florida State game. But Vegas, they can't be wrong all the time, because, well, if they are, they don't make any money. So I think there's something to Florida State being first in odds here, perhaps. And there's certainly something to them winning the ACC, because just based off of what we watched yesterday, and assuming that that's somewhat consistent with Florida State's season for the remaining 11 games, of course they could rebound. There could be an act of God, and they could have the best trench play in the nation by the end of the year. I think they have that talent, but it's unlikely. If Clemson is who I think they can be and probably will be in the trenches this year, even on the road in Doak Campbell, they could very well win, and maybe should be favored and should be picked to win and should be expected to win. I think they should be expected to win by their fan base regardless, but being expected to win by a proud fan base and program internally versus the whole college football world is a different story. And I think that the narrative, too, about the portal nationally could flip as well, given Florida State, and also depending on how Colorado and Ole Miss and some of these other teams who've used the portal heavily do. Heck, even Ohio State with what they've brought in the portal with Seth McLaughlin, a player who the jury's out on him based off how he did last season, and also combine that with the high ceiling he showed in 2022 and 2021. We'll just have to wait and see. But while the portal is useful, and while I don't think my personal opinion on the portal and its usage will be changed if Clemson beats Florida State, the mood for Florida State or Clemson, the ACC, and perhaps part of the college football world could be changed. That game right there still has big implications, because Clemson will likely be better than Georgia Tech and will be the toughest team that Florida State plays until at Miami in week 9. And for Clemson, outside of Georgia, maybe NC State, but NC State's at home. It'll probably be after Georgia the toughest game for Clemson until on the road at Virginia Tech. And Florida State could still very well be better than Virginia Tech and be the second best opponent on Clemson's schedule the whole year through. So I think Clemson can win the ACC. And I think it's much more likely, now that Florida State looks vulnerable, the fact that Clemson doesn't have to play a team like Georgia Tech, who's physical and could be one of the best teams in the ACC. I know that's a bold opinion, but I said they were a sleeper in the preseason. They did even more than I expected them to do in week 0 in Ireland. So they should be in that conversation, I think, with the performance they put on. How Florida State wins the ACC is trench play, is toughness, and it's just improvement at wide receiver and quarterback and health at running back, to the point where the skill position play overall is not just bad or below average or average. It's above average, good, maybe at the very best great. And combined with the trenches that Clemson has on defense, what they should have on offense with Matt Luke and all that they return, and also the tight end bringing stool, that's how they'll win the ACC, is by being physical, not just up front on defense, but also on the offensive line. The ACC period is wide open. And I wanted to start off with Clemson because they're first in odds. We'll get to Miami here in a few seconds. But I think the conference is wide open. So tell me down below, who do you think is going to win? Who do you think is going to win the ACC? You got Clemson, you got Miami, you got Florida State, you have Georgia Tech. I mean, look, SMU looked terrible yesterday against Nevada. They put on a garbage performance. Preston Stone was benched and still passed for nearly 300 yards because Nevada isn't that good, but Nevada scored 24 points on SMU, who I think profiled to have a defense that should have performed better than this. And they only scored 29 points. And at one point, Nevada was given over an 80% chance to win starting in the fourth quarter per FPI. Preston Stone went 17 of 30 for 254 yards, a touchdown, a pick, had a QBR of 61.6. And a lot of those yards came from a bomb to RJ Maryland in the fourth quarter. But can SMU win it? They have an easy schedule. Miami has an easy schedule, plus Damian Martinez, Cam Ward. Damian Martinez, a 1,000-yard rusher. Brought in Samuel Brown from Houston. Brought back Xavier Restrepo and Jacoby George. They have several offensive linemen who are NFL caliber. They brought in Simeon Barrow on the defensive line. Brought back Ruben Bain Jr. there as well, who was fantastic as a young defensive end. This conference is wide open. And I think that there are so many teams. I mean, heck, Virginia Tech, with what they've done, bringing in and returning, Aeneas Peebles, bringing him in from Duke, returning Antoine Powell-Ryland. On the offensive line, Parker Clements returns, Braylon Moore and Caden Moore, and Kyron Drones and Bashal Tutin are also great skill players at quarterback and running back, respectively. And maybe I'm missing a team. Maybe Syracuse with Kyle McCord does something. Or maybe NC State with Grayson McCall and Robert Anae, who's a great offensive mind. And also Jordan Waters. They can do something for sure. And Kevin Concepcion. So let me know. Let me know who you think can win the ACC this season down in the comment section below. And again, we'll get to Super Chats at the end of the stream. Just stick around. I want to get into Miami and talk about them. We talked about Clemson previously and how they can win the ACC. I now want to talk to you about Miami and how Miami can win the ACC. They're currently second in odds to win the ACC championship, and how Miami wins the ACC. And actually how, look, you want to talk about bold, how they are a national championship contender is they're just well coached. And more than well coached, more than well trained, they are put in a position to win by their CEO, Mario Cristobal. That's why. That's exactly why they'll win the ACC if they do, and how they'll win the ACC. Is that because they have the talent everywhere. The only place where Miami, Florida perhaps could be lacking is safety and corner. And they got Michelle Powell from Washington, and they have Darryl Porter Jr. as well at corner. And they have some other players, brought in some transfers. They have talent there. And their defensive end room, their edge unit might be one of the deepest in the country. I think it's the deepest in the ACC by a mile. Francisco Maigoa and Jalen Alderman are good linebackers. On the offensive line, Jalen Rivers and Francis Maigoa probably make up the best offensive tackle duo in the ACC. Samson Okunlola, Inez Cooper, Zach Carpenter make up the interior of that line. And as I've already said, Cameron Ward, Damian Martinez, and even Martinez's backup Mark Fletcher Jr. and A.J. Allen make up a deep running back room. And I think that Shannon Dawson will have one of the best offenses in the country. The defense should be good, should be better than last year. Miami should get better in basically every facet of their game compared to last year. They have questions, for sure. Cameron Ward, how consistent is he? How physical can this team be? How tough can they be when they get in a down spot, like against North Carolina last year or Georgia Tech, where they floundered? Can the skill positions improve from last year? Can they be healthy at tight end? Can the defense, put up a stop against a good offense? We'll just have to see. They have areas to improve upon, no doubt about it. But you look overall, and just if they're schemed well, if the right plays are called on an average basis, because no one's a perfect play caller outside of maybe Phil Parker at Iowa, if things just come together, really, if things are by how they say on the recruiting board and the transfer portal board, if things go how they should go based off of the player profiles, the talent, the profiles of the incoming transfers who haven't been coached by Miami before this season, then Miami should win the ACC, perhaps win a playoff game or compete for it all. But that's never how things go, because you have to factor in game management. You have to factor in the fact that Miami hasn't recruited at an elite level for 4 or 5 cycles. They haven't yet. They're still building their program. They're not where they want to or need to be to compete for it all, to bring the U back. They're not there yet. I mean, Clemson still has a more talented roster. Florida State, who hasn't recruited nearly as well as Miami, has a talent roster that's comparable to Miami in a variety of ways. I think, in fact, according to 24/7 Sports Team Talent Composite, I think they're actually ahead of Miami by 1 spot. And ironically, they're behind Florida by 1 spot. Florida's another example of a school who has a lot of talent, but very poor coaching, very disheveled, and consequently, they aren't that good. For Miami, they have an easier schedule. Their assistants, and I think strength and conditioning coach, particularly with Aaron Feld, are better than what Florida has there. But Cristobal has had hiccups, and not just at Miami in 23 or 22, but also Oregon in 21, in 20, in 19, in 18. It is in him to mess up once per season. And until that's no longer the case, I just can't give that benefit of the doubt to Miami. I can't. To go undefeated and at least at this point to win it all, or perhaps to even win a playoff game. But can they win the ACC? Absolutely. I personally would favor them over Clemson, but that's just me. It's early. We have not even seen Miami or Clemson take the field, but we will in 5 or 6 days, depending on if you count today as a part of that, countdown. But if Miami wins the ACC, and how they'll win the ACC is everything comes together. And by that, because of how good the roster is and how good the assistants are and how I think, the scheme and the players, they all fit like a nice puzzle piece. The question is, does Mario Cristobal come along with a hammer and just smash that puzzle piece to bits? And if he doesn't, if he's a CEO, if he just is hands off of everything, then, and part of that's also on the assistants, because the only way that can totally be alleviated, the Cristobal effect, is if you have elite assistants. And I'm not talking about great, I'm talking about elite, like the best of the best. If they have the best of the best, or many who are the best of the best, and the players I already think have the talent to be at that level too, then that's how Miami won the ACC, because by my roster profile and by my research and by many others, they should have the best roster in the ACC. Even if you factored Notre Dame into this equation and, adjusted for recruiting and coaching and experience and, stats and how they performed in the games, even if you had a Notre Dame who's like top 10 in talent now because Marcus Freeman's done a really good job of recruiting, and I think may even elevate Notre Dame past what Kelly had them at, which was pretty good. Miami might be the best, even factoring in Notre Dame, in terms of what they can be, in terms of their potential power. The question is, will it all come together? Will Cristobal change, or more likely, will he step away, recognize his limitations, and play to his strengths? That is how Miami wins the ACC. It's not just by being physical, not just by using the finesse that they have at the skill positions. It's also by when things get dirty, when things get down, and they inevitably will, because it happens to every team unless you're a GOAT team in the regular season. It even happened to LSU and Alabama in 19 and 20 respectively. When things get ugly, Can they come through? And if they do, then if they're that type of team, then I'd say they're a lock to win the ACC. If they don't, they can still win it, but it will be a lot harder. And a team like Clemson, Florida State, even Georgia Tech, who Miami plays again, who are in general well coached, could, and one of them probably will, beat the Hurricanes. So I think Miami, the ball is in their park. It's in their park. It's in Clemson's park. And in fact, I'd even say it's still in Florida State's park. We'll just have to wait and see how the weeks play out. College football games, as Josh Pate says, are never played on paper. They're played on the field. Thank you for watching this cut of Touchdown Talk. Remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below, and share this video around to other college football fans. I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members for sponsoring this channel and video. Thanks to Crash2488 and Brasco Rascal for being Heisman members. Thanks to Chris Lane, Connor Little OH, Ismar, and Tyler Nye for being All-American members. And thanks to John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, and Janisha Cockrell for being all-conference members. If you want direct message access to me, and also after 6 months of membership, free signed College Football with Sam merchandise delivered to your door, merchandise of your choosing, I may add. Sign up as a Heisman member for $25 a month and stick around for 6 months. All-American membership is $10. All-conference membership is $5. If you want merchandise regardless, check out my merchandise store via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. It's high-quality stuff. I wear it for all of my streams, and that's because it's comfortable, high-quality, athletic, stretchy. It's really good clothing, and I encourage you to check out my merchandise store along with my Patreon page, which are in the links in the description and in the pinned comment. Have a great day, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.